Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, I've got the camera turned the other way. Not quite sure why I did that. Because we don't have such a big scene. But, yeah, so hopefully I'm in the picture. You're in the picture?
Yeah, man.
We're hoping we're in the picture. And we're going to read Bhagavatam. We're down by... Now, this is just a kind of off-stream boat ramp area leading down to the Potomac. We just ran, 10K?
Yes.
For the Hare Krishna runners.
I fell over.
She fell over and injured her arm.
I don't know if you can see that. But
you can watch on the Hare Krishna Runners YouTube channel.
Yes.
In a couple of days.
It's called Hare Krishna Runners, the YouTube channel.
Yeah. All right. We're going to read Bhagavatam here.
All right. Canto 3, Chapter 27, Text 24. Understanding Material Nature.
Okay. We might finish the chapter today, maybe. Let's see how we go.
Really?
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Text 24. By discovering the faultiness of his desiring to lord it over material nature, and by therefore giving it up, the living entity becomes dependent and stands in his own glory. Becomes independent, I think is correct. Sorry, I fell over. And becomes independent and stands in his own glory. Purport. Because the living entity is not actually the enjoyer of the material resources, his attempt to lord it over material nature is, at the ultimate issue, frustrated. As a result of frustration, he desires more power than the ordinary living entity, and thus wants to merge into the existence of the supreme enjoyer. In this way, he develops a plan for greater enjoyment.
Any thoughts?
Well, I guess just that need in the material world we see, wanting more and more power and prestige and cutthroat world of business. You know, sometimes you think when people have got a couple of million, I'd be happy with a couple of thousand. Well, you know, it's like that, but you can't stop. You've got to get more, and someone can't be better than you. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's interesting. It kind of explains in a nice way, though, that first we have to discover the faultiness of desiring to lord it over material nature, and therefore give it up. And the living entity becomes, now this is an important word I think that Prabhupada will describe in a minute, the entity becomes independent and stands in his own glory. So by recognizing that it's impossible for us to be the Lord, which we think is real independence. If I become the Lord, then I'm independent and able to control and dominate. But here it seems to be explaining that if we give up that propensity to be the Lord, then we become independent and stand in our own glory. So let's see what Prabhupada has to say. When one is actually situated in devotional service, this is his independent position. Less intelligent men cannot understand the position of the eternal servant of the Lord. Because the word servant is used, they become confused. They cannot understand that this servitude is not the servitude of this material world. To be the servant of the Lord is the greatest position. If one can understand this and can thus revive one's original nature of eternal servitorship of the Lord, one stands fully independent. A living entity's independence is lost by material contact. In the spiritual field, he has full independence, and therefore there is no question of becoming dependent upon the three modes of material nature. This position is attained by a devotee, and therefore he gives up the tendency for material enjoyment after seeing its faultiness. Anyway, I think that's a really, really powerful statement by Srila Prabhupada, very enlightening, because, yeah, the more that we think we're independent, we're actually dependent on the modes of material nature. They're supplying this, they're making the arrangements. But we become independent of the modes of material nature when we recognize ourselves in our original position as servants, and that's a glorious position.
Like what we were saying, or the example Prabhupada giving, if you're in a prison, the prison guard and the prisoner, they're in the same building, encased in the same place, as it were, but one is free and one is not. So in this material world, the ones who think they're independent are dependent or bound, and then those who can see, as it says, the faultiness of material nature are independent.
Yeah, very nice.
Okay, next paragraph. The difference between a devotee and an impersonalist is that an impersonalist tries to become one with the Supreme so that he can enjoy without any impediment, whereas a devotee gives up the entire mentality of enjoying and engages in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. That is his constitutional glorified position. At the time he is Ishvara, fully dependent. The real Ishvara... Fully independent. At that time he is Ishvara, fully independent. Is that what yours says?
Yeah.
The real Ishvara or Ishvara Parama, the Supreme Ishvara or Supreme Independent, is Krishna. The living entity is Ishvara only when engaged in the service of the Lord. In other words, transcendental pleasure derived from loving service to the Lord is actually independence.
Very powerful about this whole principle of being independent. And Ishvara means the controller.
Right.
So we think when we're trying to manipulate things here in the material world to satisfy the senses, to bring us pleasure, to satisfy the senses of other persons or animals, whatever people are trying to do, feed their dog, love God or love your dog, then actually they're not independent. But when we accept our constitutional position as a servant, then we become Ishvara. Prabhupada is saying here, then we become actually Ishvara, which means that then we become the controller. And that's interesting because it seems like as a servant you would then become completely controlled, but in that controlled position you actually have the propensity to even control the Ishvara, right? So one who is a pure devotee, he controls God. Arjuna, Krishna boarded his chariot and became his chariot driver. The gopis, Radharani, Mother Yashoda, they actually control God. So that's the real position of Ishvara. So yeah, we just have to give up this faulty desire to lord it over the material energy and accept that it's not going to work. I think that was in the first sentence, right? Because the living is not actually the enjoyer of the material world. His attempt to lord it over material nature at the ultimate issue is always frustrated. So we're always frustrated, trying to enjoy, trying to manipulate, trying to get this, trying to get that. Yeah. Very powerful.
Okay. 25?
Yeah.
It's you.
Oh, sorry. Okay, text 25. In the dreaming state, one's consciousness is almost covered and one sees many inauspicious things. But when he is awakened and fully conscious, such inauspicious things cannot bewilder him. Purport. In the condition of dreaming, when one's consciousness is almost covered, one may see many unfavorable things which cause disturbance or anxiety. But upon awakening, although he remembers what happened in the dream, he is not disturbed. Similarly, the position of self-realization or understanding of one's real relationship with the Supreme Lord makes one completely satisfied, and the three modes of material nature, which are the cause of all disturbances, cannot affect him. Interesting analogy. In contaminated consciousness, one sees everything to be for his own enjoyment, but in pure consciousness or Krishna consciousness, he sees that everything exists for the enjoyment of the Supreme Enjoyer. That is the difference between the dream state and wakefulness. The state of contaminated consciousness is compared to dream consciousness, and Krishna consciousness is compared to the awakened stage of life. Actually, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the only absolute enjoyer is Krishna. One who can understand that Krishna is the proprietor of all the three worlds and that he is the friend of everyone is peaceful and independent. As long as a conditioned soul does not have this knowledge, he wants to be the enjoyer of everything. He wants to become a humanitarian or a philanthropist and open hospitals and schools for his fellow human beings. This is all illusion, for one cannot benefit anyone by such material activities. Now that's a very powerful statement. If one wishes to benefit his fellow brother, he must awaken his dormant Krishna consciousness. The Krishna conscious position is that of Prati-Buddha, which means pure consciousness. Prati-Buddha. Now, where did that come from? It's in the translation of the Sanskrit of one who is awake. Prati-Buddha. And I made a little note here. Prati-Buddha means pure consciousness. Prati-Buddha.
Because you're awake. You're not
asleep.
Yeah. You know, in dream state, Prabhupada says.
Yeah, in dream state.
That is the difference between the dream state and wakefulness.
Prati-Buddha. Okay. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I just said it.
Okay. Great. Okay. Should we read one? Oh, next one's a little long, but should we do one more and then conclude?
Yeah, we'll conclude after this because sitting on this rock is...
Yeah, and the batteries on the mics are about to die.
Oh God, yeah. Someone should have charged them.
Yes, I should have.
Text 26. The influence of material nature cannot harm an enlightened soul, even though he engages in material activities, because he knows the truth of the Absolute, and his mind is fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. Lord Kapila says that Mayi Manasam, a devotee whose mind is always fixed upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is called Atmarama or Vidita Tattva. Atmarama means one who rejoices in the self or one who enjoys in the spiritual atmosphere. Atma in the material sense means the body or the mind, but when referring to one whose mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, Atmarama means one who is fixed in spiritual activities in relationship with the Supreme Soul. The Supreme Soul is the personality of Godhead, and the individual soul is the living entity. When we engage in reciprocation of service and benediction, the living entity is said to be in the Atmarama position. This Atmarama position can be attained by one who knows the truth as it is. The truth is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the enjoyer, and that the living entities are meant for his service and enjoyment. One who knows this truth and who tries to engage all resources in the service of the Lord escapes all material reactions and influences of the modes of material nature.
Well, there you go. We have to become Atmarama, one who is fixed in spiritual activities in relationship with the Supreme Soul. Yeah, so everything we do, we have to try to connect it. Well, it's already connected to Krishna, we just have to see how that's true. We'll continue. An example may be cited in this connection. Just as a materialist engages in constructing a big skyscraper, a devotee engages in constructing a big temple for Vishnu. There you go, an example. If you're going to construct something, do it for Krishna. Superficially, the skyscraper constructor and temple constructor are on the same level, for both are collecting wood, stone, iron, and other building materials. But the person who constructs a skyscraper is a materialist, and the person who constructs a temple of Vishnu is Atmarama. Now, of course, if you're constructing a skyscraper for Krishna, that's also Atmarama. Now, and if you're constructing a temple for Maya, then that's...
Or name, fame, glory.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, that's very subtle, but yeah, it's true. Okay. The materialist tries to satisfy himself in relation to his body by constructing a skyscraper, but the devotee tries to satisfy the super self, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by constructing the temple. Although both are engaged in the association of material activities, the devotee is liberated and the materialist is conditioned. This is because the devotee who is constructing the temple has fixed his mind upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but the non-devotee who is constructing the skyscraper has his mind fixed on sense gratification. If while performing any activity, even in material existence, now get this, one's mind is fixed upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one will not be entangled or conditioned. Let me read that again. If while performing any activity, even in material existence, one's mind is fixed upon the lotus feet of the Personality of Godhead, one will not be entangled or conditioned. The worker in devotional service and full Krishna consciousness is always independent of the influence of material nature. Now that's a bold statement. While performing any activity, presuming this means non-sinful.
yeah.
But any activity, it states, one is basically liberated. And I think the point, without splitting the hairs of whether it means you can, smoke cigarettes, drink alcohol, engage in illicit sex, and eat meat, and still remember Krishna. But as Prabhupada said once when he met those bums and they were drinking, and they offered him some alcohol, some wine, and he said, no, you enjoy, but just remember that Krishna is the taste of your wine. And then the devotee said, Prabhupada, why didn't you tell them they shouldn't drink it? And he said, if they keep drinking, remembering Krishna as the taste in wine, eventually they'll stop drinking and just remember Krishna.
Yeah, I was thinking.
So the point is, as we said in a previous reading, the point is not to necessarily give things up artificially, but to add Krishna. So if we just remember Krishna and try to connect what we're doing to Krishna, then slowly but surely Krishna takes the prominence.
Yeah, like even Kamsa added Krishna. He added Krishna consciousness. So even he got some form of liberation. It wasn't in the right way, because don't think of Krishna consciousness in a way because I want to kill him or his devotees, but he was still thinking of him, and one could say was thinking of him more than maybe sometimes we do.
Well, that example is given by Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Nectar of Devotion. Srila Prabhupada comments that he was also Krishna conscious. Kamsa was remembering him all the time.
Yeah.
And because of that, he also did attain liberation, as did Hiranyakashipu.
Yes, and Putana.
But that is not pure devotional service.
No.
Why? Because it's not favorable. So like that.
Small point.
And Yabilashita Sunyam Gyana Karmadyanavatam Anakulyena Krishnanushilanam Bhaktir Uttamam. It's not anakul. It's not favorable. So like that.
All right.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.